Sorry, guys. I'm getting old and my patience ain't as good as it used to be, so I got tired of waiting on that countdown. Welcome to everybody to River City Media Beyond the Booth. I'm Howard Channing along with Phil Harris, and special guest tonight is Northeast Alabama Community College softball coach Joe Guthrie. Coach, thanks for joining us. I know it's a busy time of year for you.
I appreciate you guys having me for sure.
I should have threw in there the new look, Coach Joe Guthrie. Got a little bit of hair going on and everything.
We that kind of started this summer. When I was coaching with the River City Smokies in the Scenic City Collegiate League, and as you guys know, if you're coming from Central to Eastern, you will lose an hour. So if we play just about every game in the morning. So if you're the 9 a.m. game and you got to get pregame rolling at 7, that's really 6 our time. So you just kind of roll and go, and we got on a roll, and you know how it goes in baseball and softball. You don't want to mess with the streak, and then it just sort of stayed. It'll probably go at some point, but it's kind of indicative of the timetable we've been on here lately. I'm glad to be home. Haven't seen home in a while, but yeah, good to be here for sure.
Yeah, we appreciate you taking the time, and you're a heck of a man to be able to wear a beard in this temperature outside. I tell you that much.
It looks like I'm in good company, so I'm learning. I'm still learning. So not like you pros are.
I got mine on to cover up all this ugly I got. I don't know about everybody else, but
I get it. Yeah, I understand that.
so, Coach, tell us a little bit about this summer so far, as traveling around and the recruiting and everything you've been able to do.
So I mentioned before, being in the Scenic City Collegiate League was kind of we did that for a couple different reasons. I was real grateful to Jimmy Colitis, our AD, and Dr. Campbell, our president, for letting me do that. Part of why we did it was to try and get a better understanding. As you know, the college athletics world is rapidly changing. And, with that, you had, our league was kind of different. You had about half our roster were kids that were at four-year schools that were not planning to transfer, just wanted to play and get better. The other half, roughly, were kids that were in the portal. So they're trying to get better too, but they're also trying to find a home. So that was challenging. And then just, with the roster cuts coming and the settlement coming almost in the middle of when we were doing that, that was different. We were fortunate enough to find a home for everybody on our roster. And then that was also good for us at Northeast because every time we're kind of in the middle of that negotiation, our name gets brought up. So that was good. I think that league, we had 4 teams this year. I could easily foresee it, expanding to 8. There's just a lot of demand for that right now as their, roster numbers are going to 25. Some people don't have that problem. Some schools do if they were carrying more than that, prior to going into this year. So it's tough for coaches to navigate those waters. And you've got a lot of players, whether they're junior college, high school, 4-year kids on the portal, competing to try and find spots. So I learned a lot this summer, pretty educational for us. The other thing that was really convenient for us, you kind of on the normalized side of recruiting, is you had, the PGF Grand Tournament, the Owl City Tournament, the Scenic City Tournament, of course, that everybody knows was right there. So we had 3 tournaments that we would ordinarily recruit. If I'm coaching in the morning, I can just slide over there and do that as well. So it was like a double-edged sword. I can see some of the players that are on our list out of high school, and then also we can corral some of the coaches that are already scouting those tournaments to come over and see the games that we were putting on in the morning. So very convenient. I mean, as you guys know, Chattanooga is a hotbed for softball, and that was just another byproduct that came out of that. But I think it's going to have legs as far as the league, and we were glad to get a foothold in that and be a part of something special this summer for sure.
That's awesome. I know the kids are not on campus yet. Coming up, during the summertime, do you give the kids a special workout they got to do during the summer to help them improve on everything, or do you just kind of let that be up to them?
We have player development plans that go all year. So really what we're doing, when they get to the summer, is just kind of a continuation of that. We usually break that down. If it's hitting, there'll be, one or two items we need to work on in the drills that are specified to that mechanically, one or two items situationally that we want them to work on. And the same thing goes for all of it, base running, pitching, defense, all of that kind of has the specified, maybe one or two items, not 15, that they need to, work through. And then on the physical side, a continuation of kind of where we were with, a lot of our plyometric programs and, our circuit training and things of that nature. And, this year, last year's team was kind of just getting us into the shape of being a college softball player. This year, with the advent of the Proteus motion machine that we have that can really, I think we're one of 3 softball programs in the country that has that. It can test anything from rotational acceleration to vertical force to a lot of things. And we can start to specify, and individualize their workouts. So those are things that we're looking forward to this year as we kind of, take the next step. But yeah, that all gets kicked out to them, as soon as possible, once the season ends, and then they go to work on it. So, and obviously the ones that are close have an advantage because the facility we have, they utilize that a lot. So it's good stuff.
Phil, after I ask this, it's all yours. Coach, do you go by the honor system, or do they have to check in with you or one of the assistants to let them know, yeah, we are doing what we're supposed to do?
No, we don't really. It's more of a, we let them do what they have to do. Now, one of the things that we found out kind of unbeknownst to us is, they've been running, for lack of a better term, I used to call it in the NCAA world, captain's practices, but they've doing that on a random day. We didn't even know about it. 8 a.m. Some days they'll have 5, some days they'll have 15, some days they'll have 10. We've had kids, drive up and they all do that themselves. We're not allowed to work with them, during the summer, but they're up there doing their thing. And that usually in the past, if we've had that, has been a good mark, a good mark of a team coming through. We've had, and we have something this year that we haven't had where, we've got sophomore leadership, and that's who, from my understanding of it, has been kind of spearheading this. Not always, but that's just something that they didn't have as freshmen. Nobody's fault. It's just, when you're starting a new program, and they've taken the reins and really gone with it. So that's good stuff. I'm glad to see that. And some of them that aren't, or close to us have sent videos of what they're doing. So it's not just because if they're here and within sight and we kind of see them coming in and out of the building here and there. There are obviously some that are further away. They're doing their thing too. And all of our freshmen are playing this summer, playing a lot. So, that's a plus too. So we're excited about what's coming for sure.
Well, Coach said, that's what I was going to ask you. I said, year one's kind of a learning curve for you and them, getting to know you getting to know them. But I guess coming into year 2, when you're talking about the sophomore class, they kind of know your expectations and what you're looking for.
Yeah, I think, they have an advantage, on experience, and that's a big advantage in a 2-year system. It'll be an advantage for a while. We've got some really talented freshmen that are coming in. Some of them may be ready right away. Some of them may be ready in year 2. It's hard to forecast that. I know it's a really talented group, both coming back and coming in, but I'm just grateful to have a mix. As you stated, it's a lot. I shouldn't say it's easier, but it's helpful, that we have people that know our expectations, and I'm grateful for the opportunity this summer that we had with that group that I had. You're talking about a mixed bag. I mean, you've got kids at different levels in the of the 4-year system. Some are transfers, some are not. And, you're just kind of going out there after a couple of practices and figuring it out. And, we had kids, from the 4-year level come down and use our facility. That was good. And it was a challenge for me because it's another way to plug into, the leadership aspect of coaching, because I'd really never done anything like that before. So, we had a good year. We won the regular season. So that was always a plus. So a lot of lessons there. just from how you manage a team, under really different circumstances that I think will carry over to our ball club as well. So really, really grateful for that opportunity.
Well, you were talking about, I want to go back to the Scenic City team. I know at one time they won like 9 in a row and it really got on a good run. Who were some of the young ladies? Where did a lot of them come from? Were they a lot from the Chattanooga area, or were they kind of spread out?
It was spread out. I mean, we had, Bree Warren that, that was kind of a different deal. She's originally from Texas. I coached her at A&M, a few years back. She went to South Carolina after that. That didn't work out, and she was looking for a home for one more year. Had a great year, hit like 570 in the league. We only had her for about half the year, but she made the most of it. And then, just got an offer to Virginia Tech. So we were real happy about that. And, Bree's has been through a lot, and it's good to see her kind of, she was an all SEC freshman, at A&M, and then had some injuries and a couple coaching turnovers. And, sometimes that can be challenging, but I feel like, with Coach DeMore and Virginia Tech, she's in a good spot. And she was a bright light. UTC's Abby Bunt, who's from Glencoe, not too far down the road, played with us. She was incredible this summer. I mean, we only had her for about half the year too. But she had, she hit 6 home runs, I think, in about 15 or 16 games, and 25 RBIs, 4 grand slams, 2 in one game. I've seen that like 3 times in my life. So she had a great year. She's going to do some good things, I think, for those guys. We had some kids from Austin P, a couple that are going to transfer into Troy. So all over the place, really. Jacksonville U and down in Florida. I'm probably leaving some out. Had a kid that's from Atlanta that pitched at Delaware last year that's going to do a good job for them. So it was a good bunch. I really enjoyed that. And, it kind of plugs you into, different types of players from different backgrounds, different programs, and getting them all to mesh was kind of fun and challenging. So very enjoyable.
Well, tell me this way. I mean, I know it's a different situation than what you're coaching now in developing players. With these kids, they know how to play. These young ladies know how to play. Is it kind of sort of a mentor type thing?
I'd equate it to instructional ball, in minor league baseball, at least when they used to do that. That's kind of waning now. So we had some sessions, both in Chattanooga and then at our place where we could practice and develop there. But it's really, you're trying to bring things up in game real time that also doesn't get in the way of them playing, which is challenging. You don't want to overcoach, but you also don't want to just sit back and collect a check and do anything. So it's kind of a challenge. The biggest thing for me was really kind of learning each player and knowing when to have a moment and when not to. And that's the part that, in the data-driven world we're in now gets lost, because first and foremost, your number one product is human beings. So with human beings, you're going to have a variety of reactions and how they take things in. And I had to be really, really disciplined this summer on that, because you got a snapshot of time with them. You've got to figure out, when to push and pull. And so that was challenging, and they were great. I didn't have to tell anybody to be on time. And sometimes we were there very, very, very early in the morning. We had kids that were driving from Atlanta to come play, and then they'd get right back in the car and drive back. So, from the discipline standpoint, a lot of people will poo-poo kids on the portal. Those kids absolutely worked, this summer to do that. My hat was off to them. So, from my standpoint, you've got to really, I think it was good from a learning experience of knowing kind of when to push and pull under, it was just uncharted territory for me. So I definitely think I grew as a coach, and I think they grew as players. And, I appreciate Tommy Santiago ran our team, ran a lot of the league. Michelle LaCourse, both those guys are plugged in at Chattanooga, and Chase Morgan over at Red Bank High School. They were just fantastic all summer. So, and just very few people, not just our team, but the other teams in the league didn't really want to go home. Somebody's doing something right there. So we were excited for sure.
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of the young ladies, I know they have a lot of different bosses, so to speak, but a lot of them did take to coaching very well.
Yeah, I did not have an issue there. I felt like, and I told them too, I'm learning as much from them as I am on the other way. Kind of like in the old days when Jimmy and I were, we used to coach in the pro league some. I've done 3 stints doing that in the summer. It's similar, except those kids are already done with college. And usually, just like on the baseball side, like you're going to do more coaching with the rookies. The veterans a lot of times kind of understand, the grind and the day in, day out of professional softball. But here it's not that way. Here it's like all rookies in a way. So the thing that, our game, I feel like whether it's baseball or softball is played best when it's like a day in, day out deal, because you can't really get too emotional. You just have to grind it out. If you do, man, you're really going to be in the tank because it's just such a grind doing it every single day. So it kind of keeps you in the right mental, framework. I feel like I wish we could do that in college. The 3-game series on the weekend is probably the closest thing we have, but then there's a break and then there's kind of a waiting and time and all the time you spend preparing. It's almost sometimes feels like overkill. But here you're just, kind of grinding it out, and you really have to be, acute with the situation that you got. Situational awareness just keeps coming up. So you've got to be able to adjust there. And I feel like that's highly valuable to players because they don't get a lot of that at that level. We had it in baseball for years. I played in the wood bat league between my freshman and sophomore year and sophomore to junior year. Highly, highly valuable. And I'm glad that it's coming to softball now. We've got a league in Chattanooga. The same ownership group owns a league down in Florida. There's another one in Southern California, another one in Central Texas and Austin. And then they're probably going to add one in Kansas City. So the opportunities for young women to grow, in the summer are just really good. So, you throw that in with what we're doing in junior college, playing almost 100 games. I like those opportunities for development for those, for our female athletes. So it's just something that didn't exist. So it's getting better for sure.
Yeah, well, getting back to your program, of course, you talked about a lot of the young ladies are playing softball over the summer, and I'm sure a lot last year, a young softball team, y'all struggled a little bit on the road. And I think that's where you come in maybe year 2, the little bit more mental toughness will be there, because to me, how you judge a softball program is the teams that win that final game of the weekend, because that's the one that's grueling. You're tired. It's time to go home. But that's kind of a measuring stick for any program if they're going to be successful.
Yeah. And we played a tough schedule last year in the fall. It wasn't as challenging, and that was kind of by design in the preseason. We not saying we didn't play some, we played in the Oxford tournament. That was always really good. Played some teams that ended up in the World Series that are kind of out of our region. This year is going to be, there are no gimmies, none, zero. Hang on one second. I got a 4-year-old here. What's going on? I sure can in just a second. Yeah. Appreciate it. So anyway, like I said, we're juggling multiple hats here, but just to give you a preview of the fall, we've got we'll play at Mississippi State. We play Jacksonville State at Chocolaco. We'll play on the road in Louisiana where we play McNeese and Louisiana Tech. We'll play under the lights at Georgia Tech. We'll go to UAH, and I'm not trying to toot our horn, but I don't know if there may be somebody that's playing as hard a schedule, but there isn't many for sure. And so I think that's going to be highly valuable to our team. If you can be in that environment and withstand that, then, when we get to the spring, that should make you better. And obviously, we had a good showing in our conference last year at the World Series. I would say probably one of the best we've had in over a decade. I mean, Wallace State finished 3rd. Southern Union won 2 games. We haven't done that in a while. So I think that's kind of an indication of where the league can go. And, just to get out of our conference and win it, you're going to have to be pretty good. And then, we're going to have McLennan out of Texas come play us. Georgia Highlands are going to come over. That's going to be a good test for us. So we're going to do some things to ramp things up and challenge our athletes because, if we're going to win a championship, we're not. Our league's tough enough. We've got to make everything else, I think, as tough or tougher headed into conference. So, the piece you're talking about on the road, that's definitely built into what we're trying to do for sure. Cause you're right. I mean, you got to be able to do it. So yeah, we're excited about the challenge.
Well, Coach, going into this fall, what are some of the things you feel like you're very strong at? Of course, you're going to have to work on a little bit of everything. What are some of the areas you feel like these teams' strengths, and what are some of the areas you've got a whole lot of catching up to do?
Well, we've just on paper, I feel like we have covered, every loose end that we had a year ago. First one is experience. The second piece is the ability to defend on the left side of the field, which I just don't think we were at a point, recruiting wise, starting it where we had, people that was their primary position and they could get in there and do that. I feel like we're way better there on paper. We'll see how that goes in the fall, but there's definitely some talent there. We returned 2 really good players in the outfield, but we've got some in that are going to really push them. The middle of the field is much better. We're much deeper, behind the plate. We're much deeper in the circle. That's obviously a big thing. We're just more, we're more athletic. So the biggest thing for me, on paper, all that's great, but that really doesn't matter. It's, getting the ones that have been here, the ones that are coming in to come together and work as a unit. And that's one thing, that was a good experience this summer to have happen. We learned some lessons we think are going to be valuable for this team. But those are the biggest things I think coming in going forward that I think are going to help us, but, we feel like we've got, more speed, more athleticism. Every block we wanted to check on paper is there, but it's just a matter of getting that to mesh. And that's the challenge, right? I mean, I don't really see a spot talent wise. You're always, trying to get better. There's not anything that I'm like, we're radically deficient if we're healthy, but, I feel like it's just the proof's in the pudding part, that we've got to do, which is easier said than done. So that's kind of where we're going forward.
Yeah, and I guess you're talking about health wise. That's a key thing. But off season workouts helps that a lot because if you're in good condition, wise, arm wise, and all those things, some of the injuries you hopefully will be minimal.
Yeah, and that didn't. We had a couple last year that got us mid-season. Not anything nobody that was lost for the year, other than a couple pre-existing, conditions. But one of the reasons why I think is we're just really fortunate. With the facility, you've got 2 cold tubs in there. You've got every type of recovery device available. Like this summer we had, when we were playing basically 25 games in 30 days, and a lot of our athletes used our trainer, used the facility, and they were bouncing back pretty quick. Nobody was out there, and that's a real grind. As they're both grinds, college and what we did this summer. But I think Kane Buff, our trainer, has a huge part in that, and we like to think we recruit deep enough where we're not having everybody shoulder the load, and we spend a lot of time on. We have not had an arm injury, knock on wood, in our program since 2009, and that's everywhere I've been. And we try to be as smart as we can on that stuff, and that's tough these days because there's a lot of overuse, in baseball and softball these days. So, we try to iron that out as best we can, but it's been good for us so far, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So, well, Coach, who are some of the players that you've got coming back this year that were part of the team last year that you're counting on? Because I'm sure some of the young ladies would like to hear their names. And talk about some of the ones you've got coming in that you kind of have high expectations for.
Well, there's some things, if you're looking like I do between the lines. Skylar Branch, Kaylee Warnock, in the circle, we're both in the, if I'm not mistaken, in the top 5 in strikeouts per game. Skylar in ERA too. Those 2, work ethic wise, kind of growing up, maturity wise, have really, really turned a corner. In the off season, just from some of the conversations we've had, and then where they finished. So I feel really good there. Obviously, Kylie Weston and Chloe Hatch, if you look at the numbers, those aren't a big surprise. They were both 400 hitters last year. And, not that that's the benchmark, but I think they're going to, both with leadership and just their athleticism are going to help us a lot. And, those are four that really stick out. We're going to have some other kids that are interesting, that are coming back that really finish strong. Sierra Walding and Sophia Murphy and Maddie Wilson all hit really well, and they hit really well in like platoon spots, spot starts, pinch hitting spots in the case of Maddie Wilson, which is not easy to do. So that's exciting to see where they may go. Cheyenne Parker, if we keep getting the change up going, she had some moments of brilliance against Southern Union, against Wallace State, two really good teams. So who knows, where that could take us. And then obviously with the incoming bunch, it's really interesting to see. We had a couple bounce back transfers. The Francesca Lump kid coming from Memphis, I think will help us behind the plate. Addie Edwards being the Georgia Gatorade Player of the Year, won a couple state championships in the circles, a big deal. Aaron Harrelson from, the Athens area in Georgia's had a nice run. Lorelei Sullivan in the outfield, Bree Wilson in the outfield, who's from the Chattanooga area. Olivia Acuff. There's a lot of kids that are kind of, if you follow softball regionally, are kind of household names, on the circuit. So, and the other one too, we've got a couple local kids, Austin McNeese, Morgan Puckins has had an outstanding summer on a really good travel ball team. And Marty McCluskey from Tuscaloosa is another one that we feel like has a big time upside. And we picked up a couple kids from Texas that we feel like are going to help us. So it's going to be a diverse array of talent. And, like I said, it's just going to be a matter of us kind of gelling together and figuring out, what we need to do and how we're going to do it and go from there for sure. But we're certainly excited about those people.
Well, I guess you're excited about it because you kind of sort of make a name for yourself. Right now, you have to get out and shake a lot of bushes to get people to notice who you are. Because, you can look around. Wallace State's been established a long time. We had Coach Blythe Golden on from Chattanooga State. Basically, people know exactly who they are. They come to them a lot of times. And I'm sure that's the kind of thing you want to see happen at Northeast College, where they're kind of knocking on your door.
Yeah, we've actually had a lot of that. It helps with the staff we have. We sent, there's two kids that were in our program last year that are in Division I this year. I don't know a lot of schools in the state that can say that, and that's our first year. Obviously, with the kids we sent this summer, the reason we're getting the schedule that we had this fall, I think has a lot to do with people know what kind of roster that we're going to have, and saw some of the development points I mentioned late. So I felt like with last year's team, if we had another 40 to 60 games against the exact same competition, we would be better. We feel pretty confident about, the staff we have, the way we do things, the facilities. And, we're just shooting to be the best. And we feel like we're in a really good spot to do that. So, yeah, and we're fortunate enough with some of the resources we have, budgetary and fundraising wise, that, I just got back from Louisiana and headed to California in 2 days. So just a tremendous amount of support we've had from Dr. Campbell and Jimmy to be able to do that. So not everybody can do that, but we're certainly going to take advantage of that. And it's been great to be able to get the name out there in a short amount of time for sure.
Yeah, definitely a lot of talk about Northeast softball. It's headed in the right direction, and I'm sure you were pleased with the crowd support and community support last year. And I'm sure you're gonna, hope and pray that keeps happening because, that also brings in kids. If they come into stadiums and there's a lot of folks interested in the program, that makes a real difference.
It does. It was, we, like you mentioned, the road record, the home record was pretty good for a first year program. Yes. Why? I think it had a lot to do with some of the things you mentioned. It's when you walk in there with the atmosphere, it feels like a Division I atmosphere. We've coached in that. I've coached in Division I atmospheres that don't, quite frankly, compare to what we have. So I think that definitely is an advantage for you, and it helps our kids learn, if they're going to go and play somewhere else, that it's not that big a jump because they've done it here. So yeah, and the The crowd makes a difference for sure because, we didn't feel like we were at a disadvantage at home for sure. So really pleased with that.
Well, last year, Coach, I mean, it's kind of a learning curve, and I know you had said that wins and losses wasn't really the measuring stick for this program. But did you, at times, had to kind of sort of hold back and try to be patient with these young ladies because you knew there were going to be a lot of growing pains?
Yeah, that's we were really everything last year was going toward this year, and just like when we have success, I try not to you know dwell on that too much, and you just try to learn from each from each day really. But from the standpoint of what we needed to accomplish last year, it was pretty successful going forward because this is the first time we've really had and I've done this before starting a program, especially at the 2-year level. It feels like you're shooting with the same amount of bullets everybody else is. And nothing against the kids that were there last year. It's just it's a bunch of freshmen that don't really, and even the ones that came in that did a good job as sophomores, they haven't done that under us, and that makes a huge difference. Because at some point on every team, you're always going to have players that look around and go, "What exactly is this?" And the coaches can only do so much, but there has to be that players-led group that's in there that's like, "Hey, this is what they mean. This is what they expect." We didn't really have that. Got better as the year went on, but I don't think it's crazy to see why you don't have that, because it's just a disadvantage you have of starting out. So we feel better about that going forward for sure.
What do you feel like a big, huge part? Of course, I mean, travel, you do spend a lot together. Do you encourage these young ladies or, to kind of, try to get together and spend some time together off the field? Because I think that's what leads to kind of what you're talking about, where you become player driven.
Yeah. And, like I said, unbeknownst to me, I mean, I've been on the road a lot this summer. They've really taken, we obviously stay up with them about every 7 to 14 days, and, that just, calling or texting or whatever. And, the latest, this summer's been, oh yeah, we had, we went out, 7 to 10 of us went out and, worked out on the field. We're, hey, we did this. We went to the beach together. So, and obviously there's going to be people on this team that know each other from a year's experience. But I also am hearing, I'll get texts from some of the freshmen like, I like everybody here. I talked to one of them today. They've just, run into each other here and there, trying to get classes scheduled, that kind of thing. It's been really positive, and I think that just is all part of, this going through. But I don't feel like, at least initially, very, very early on, that I've had to really push that a whole lot. That there's some things that are moving in the right direction without anything I'm having to do. So that's hopefully a good sign, going forward.
Yeah, because that makes your job a lot easier. Because I mean, last year you had to put your fingers on everything. You had to touch everything. Well, this year, stadium's built. Everything's kind of fallen into place, and now you can concentrate a lot more on development and getting to know the young ladies.
Yeah, it's funny. It feels like a distant memory now, but having to deal with what we had to deal with in the fall, and I'm not complaining. I mean, obviously we got a good finished product out of it. That was challenging. When you're kind of the traveling road show, you don't know where you're going to practice every day. Sometimes we were able to get on our field. Sometimes we had to go to a local high school. Sometimes, we'd have to go at night because, just that kind of disrupts the flow of where you're at. You're trading, places to where you go work out. So all those they're challenges. It makes you better as a coach. It makes you better as a player, but it's certainly different planning now, that all those things are there. It like I said, I don't really think anything's easier, but it makes it a little more organized. Let's put it that way. So I'm grateful for that for sure.
Well, Coach, a big part of being a college coach is having a good rapport with your high school coaches. That's very important. What are some of the things you do to kind of sort of stay in touch with those people?
Well, just about every local event, whether it's travel or high school, we're involved in, high school games, travel tournaments that are local. I have had some of them, come to our office, and we've done this multiple times. We've exchanged, hey, what are you guys doing? What we're doing. That's highly valuable because, the high school coaches are still in the kids' lives quite a lot. Not saying anything against the travel guys, but, you know, very likely they may also be teaching a class on a campus. So they're seeing a window into that kid for X amount of hours a day, 5 days, sometimes more than that a week. So, that's been valuable, not only in our state, but over in Georgia, Tennessee. We have relationships with high school coaches because sometimes that gets lost. Everything's kind of travel. And we have a lot of relationships with those guys too. But we're going to try to organize some coaching clinics going forward. And that's not just like, hey, listen to what I say, I'm the great all-knowing college coach. It's been really beneficial from those guys' standpoint to see how they're teaching it, how they found success, because it's kind of like when I scouted with the Marlins, when we would finish a draft, one of the smart things we did in our organization is they would call you down and go, hey, so-and-so wants to talk to you about this kid, down in the Florida State League. And I remember thinking at first, being 27 years old, why? I thought my job was done, once we did the draft. And what you're realizing is, I saw these kids for X amount of months, and they want to know, okay, has his mechanics changed in his swing? He's doing this now. Did he do it 2 months ago when you were seeing him? And all that was highly valuable. And it's kind of the same principle with the high school guys. They've seen these kids a long time. Maybe there's something that they saw or know very, very well that, you may waste the season trying to figure out on your own, and they knew the answer. So I try to, I'm on the phone with those guys a lot, especially if we have their players. That relationship continues even after we have them, because, again, there may be a nugget there that they've seen, and I'm certainly going to lean on it because, this isn't done all by yourself for sure. So those are good relationships, and we've got some real good ones, around our local area. And, when I say that, I mean across the 3-state area that we cover. And, that's been really good for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think where that comes in too is, that gives you some pointers, and you get to know a little bit more about these young ladies because, really when you get them at Northeast, you want them to become a family.
Sure. And, with us, and you guys know this being in the area, they told me when I got here, we really are a community college in the very sense of the word. And that's part of it, on the softball side. When we have events here, their old coaches show up. Our kids go back to those programs, to, watch a practice, to, mentor some of those athletes that they were teammates with. So all that's just an extension of the program that we want to continue for sure. And has been really, really good. And it's not always, even at the 4-year level, a lot of times you don't have that. Even if you try, it's just bigger communities. It's harder to do. But here we feel real good about that for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So, well, Coach, how about fall camp? When does it get started, and when does the actual fall season get started?
So our kids will be back around the 9th of August. That's when we can officially start practice. I don't ask me about fall camp dates yet, because I bit off way more than I could chew in the summer. I think we ran 7 camps. That's just the ones we did in the fall. I just got back from one that Jimmy and I did that was 14 hours, a 14-hour day the other day in Louisiana. I can't even think in my head how many I've done outside of the state, to include, recruiting trips and all that kind of stuff. It's been really interesting to include coaching that team. So we've done a lot, and that's not our lessons and some of the things we've done there too. So a lot of stuff. But what we're trying to do is we'll probably block out a night for lessons and camp. We've been real successful with kind of a practice 2-hour model that we'll do on campus, and then go from there. It'll probably start back up in August. We've got some stuff to clean up recruiting wise. I mean, in this next week alone, I've got to go to California for PGF Nationals, and then I speak in North Carolina, their association really grateful that they're taking me over to Greensboro and doing that. And then we'll probably go over to Chattanooga for Open Nationals and Alliance, and then take a vacation for a little while. So, yeah, so a lot of stuff to do, but yeah, that's kind of our thought process going forward. Is we'll continue with kind of our one-on-ones. This summer we had a 6 to 8 session on Wednesday, and then we had a 4 o'clock 1 hour hitting session, and then a 5 to 6 defense session with me, and that's not counting that's just what I was doing. That's not counting what Courtney and Jimmy do as well, and they're knee deep in that. So if you're in our facility, it's like Grand Central Station. I mean, people come through there as far away as Illinois. There's not a dull moment in that place for sure. So we're excited about it.
Well, Coach, I know that you came here. The good Lord put you here for a reason. What has kind of sort of been your favorite thing about outside of softball? What have you enjoyed the most about coming to Northeast Alabama?
Oh, I would say the scenery of the area we're in. I haven't had too many bad days since I've been here at Northeast, but we all have good days. We all have days that aren't as good as the good days. But one of the things I've tried to treasure is when you drive around this area from Chattanooga to Huntsville to our immediate Jackson DeKalb area. I mean, what a just beautiful place it is. My wife's probably not real happy with me, but like I love to go down to the docks in Scottsboro, and I just love the scenery down there, and I love steak. It's just kind of it's better after a win, but I'll take it any day. It's just a beautiful area. If you go north, I mean, some of the places we've got, I would put up anywhere. If you go up to, I'm going to butcher the name of that place, but that one that's up high and Top of the Rock in Jasper, that's a cool place. Yes. I don't know if you guys have been there. That's just really unique. I mean, you don't know that you're not in Southern California or Rome or what a view, So I don't know too many places that have, and I'm just naming a couple that have that kind of thing with the lakes and the mountains right there. So that's the biggest thing I enjoy is just the natural beauty of where we live. And, thank goodness it doesn't cost an arm and a leg to be here too. You feel like you can actually have your dollar go a little bit. So a lot of advantageous things about our community that are good, but I would say that the natural beauty would be top of the list for me.
Yeah. And the thing is, I grew up in Chattanooga, and I thought I'd eventually go back to that, the larger city. I thought I would, but the more I stayed down here, and I think it's the people. I enjoy the people here. You kind of get to know everybody, and everybody gets to know you. It seems like Northeast Alabama is just a special place because so many communities are community sports, and you see that in high school football, basketball, softball, baseball, all sports. The communities really support athletics around here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure. I mean, it's amazing how many people. I mean, you can go as far away as Ringgold to Scottsboro, and they know each other. And it stretches across state lines and that kind of thing. So it's a cool deal. We're really fortunate there. And you mentioned the communities. There's a lot of good schools, between that area that I mentioned. Just hard not to find a pretty good community school, which is rare, So, we really enjoy that part of it. We've made some really good friends here. We feel like our daughter really enjoys it here. So all of that is a plus. And like I said, doesn't really matter the time of year. The scenery is great. And, I like to think we have 4 seasons, but they're not ridiculously bad, except for maybe the heat a little bit in the summer. But it could, Jimmy and I went to Louisiana this week, and I was like, man, I'm glad we live where we live, because I do like hot instead of cold, but I don't really want to be out in 98 where it's sweltering. Here we get a little bit of mountain breeze and all that good stuff. So, that helps for sure.
Yeah, because I've been to New Orleans, and it be about 38 degrees, and it's so humid you sweat. So that's just the way it is in Louisiana. Well, Coach, I want to mention, I want to mention one more thing. I'll turn you over to Howie, let him ask you a few questions. You mentioned this to me about the Chattanooga Lookouts. They're getting away from that downtown, up on the hill stadium,
Mm-hmm.
and coming out with a new state of the art. And we have folks that listen from the Chattanooga area.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be nice to go watch the Lookouts and get away from that disaster downtown where it's hard to park, especially if you've got other events going on. Baseball is going to be happening in Chattanooga.
I was pretty blown away. And again, I'm a novice. I haven't spent that much time, but obviously spent a lot of time this summer, and I've spent a lot of time there. My experience in the past with Chattanooga has been recruiting, because you can't coach college softball and not have recruited in Chattanooga at some point with the amount of tournaments that they have. But I hadn't been as intimate with it as I did this summer. And yeah, you're right. I mean, and I am not, look, I'm a softball coach. I'm not an urban planner. So, but it's curious to see, they're going to put that stadium there. But, if you go behind it and you go into the area downtown, kind of around like Finley Stadium area, I was shocked at how many new apartments, new restaurants, new roads, bunch of cranes. I mean, I've always kind of lived by, if you see cranes, that's good. A lot that means things are in progress, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I don't know how they're gonna do. I'm sure they got a plan. So I'm not sharpshooting them at all, but how they're gonna do, the flow in and out traffic wise. But you're right. I would suppose it would be better than what they've got. But looks like a really cool venue, and it looks like that they are already anticipating, kind of similar to what Huntsville did with, Toyota Field and all that. There's certainly been a lot of stuff built around there, but I'm excited to see what it's going to look like. I've seen that, unfold in Huntsville and Birmingham when they did new stadiums, even in Biloxi with Shuckers. And so the Southern League's a really cool level of baseball, has been in the past. So I'm excited for the city and the local area, and should be cool for sure.
Yeah, definitely bring some of us folks up there. I've been to several Lookouts games, but I'm the old Ingalls Stadium.
There you go.
Chattanooga Lookouts fan, because it's still there. They just don't use it anymore.
Sure. Yeah. No, it'll be cool. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, Howie, I'll turn it over to you.
Coach, we got a question that came in. Does general public miss the risk that portal kids take, almost betting on themselves but walking away from scholarships?
Well, that's funny they say that, because one of the things that's changed this year, that if the general public doesn't know, they're going to know soon enough. With the settlement, there's an acronym that people are finding out kind of the hard way, DSA, meaning designated student athlete. So, as part of that settlement, just to take softball, for example, you're looking at 25 roster spots you got to fill. Where if you had 30 kids, one of the things that in that settlement is allowed the coaches to do is they'll say, okay, well, you can put a DSA label on, say, 5 kids if you had 30, which means and there's a lot that goes into this. I'm just going to paraphrase it. But, those kids maybe didn't have a choice. So they're looking at it going, all right, I'm a designated student athlete. Part of what that means is anyone can talk to me now for the remainder of my eligibility until I either run out of eligibility or graduate, whichever happens first. So that it's kind of like they're not as invested in you as maybe they could be, but you've got options in case you want to go. How that's going to shake out, I could only speculate, but it's really interesting. So it's not always the case of the student athlete, especially right now, where they're walking away from something. Sometimes in this most recent chapter of all this, it's almost being forced. We had a kid this year that was at a school. She was told she was DSA, kind of told, hey, the portal's where you need to go. She got on it. And honestly, that was the best thing that they did at the time, because they had until July 6th to put a DSA label on kids. They had till December 1st, if I'm not mistaken, to get that roster down to 25. And again, I'm not sharpshooting anybody on this. This was thrown, this is court decided, court dictated. So, coaches are going to have some really unhappy and some really unpleasant phone calls. And this is not a system that they welcomed or invented, but they're going to be kind of like the cops when a bad law happens. they're the ones that are going to catch the brunt of it, you know. So it makes me glad I'm not on that level anymore. But, you know, that's been kind of the most recent thing where they're not always just walking away. You know, some of it is not their, you know, not really their doing, but it's a risky deal betting on yourself. But, you know, one of the things with those leagues that are coming up, I think allows them to, you know, maybe get some development and some exposure that allows a new opportunity coming up. But it can be risky, yes. You know, pre-DSA, some of the data we saw was, you know, 40% of the kids, you know, the first year weren't finding a home. About 70% of those kids weren't playing again. So, yeah, it can be risky. I don't know what this data is going to look like. You know, you know, you throw in the DSA label and all the roster changes, I would be completely speculating to tell you. But it's a different universe even than what we saw 3 months ago. So it's changing. But, yeah, that's kind of my long answer on that because there's a lot that goes into that for sure. It's a good question.
Coach, when you're traveling to different locations to play as far as Northeast and everything, does your AD or whoever have to find the hotels to stay at, or does the team that you're going to go play, do they kind of help you, or how does that work out?
Some help from, you know, we don't have a ton at our level. We don't have a ton of overnight trips. We try to do one in the fall because we always are going to have one as the conference currently lays out with Coastal South. You know, because they're down in Bay Minette. That's a long one for us. So one of the reasons we try to go overnight in the fall, you know, obviously players are going to do that at the higher levels more than they will here. But the other thing is we're going to have to do that in the spring too. So I think that helps us, you know, get used to the road and those long trips. But Courtney does all that for us. I would be lying. You know, she did a lot of that when we were at the 4-year level. I don't, you know, she's very good at it. You know, she's had some experience being on staffs without directors of operations at the 4-year level, and that's never been my forte. So she does all that, and you know, we try to do the best we can. You know, as far as getting the right hotel and try to work that into our plan with, you know, are we practicing? Are we coming down there and just playing and going? And, you know, with proximity to restaurants and field and all that good stuff. But, yeah, sometimes help from them, but we do a lot of it on our own for sure.
You mentioned Courtney and Jimmy a lot during this interview. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about them. It seems like they're your assistant coaches and everything.
So Jimmy's a unique situation because he's the athletic director and he's been kind enough to, you know, lend us his expertise as the assistant softball coach. He's obviously well versed in softball. He's still on the Team USA coaching pool. He heads out later this week. He's actually helping the men's team, the Team USA men's team, with some evaluation workout in Oklahoma City. You know, he and I coached together in the pro league several years ago with Scrapyard Dogs, won a championship in the old, you know, National Pro Fast Pitch deal under Jerry Glasgow as the head coach. So he was at Oregon. He came here from Arizona State. He's been a successful head coach at UAB. So tons of experience. Still considered to be one of the best hitting and catching guys and recruiters in the country. So, I mean, we couldn't be happier getting Jimmy on board. But his primary job is running the athletic department, which he's done a really good job of. I mean, you know, he's made hires in soccer and, you know, cross country since he's been here. We hired a new golf coach. So he's done a lot of things. He's overseeing the soccer stadium construction right now. That are in addition to all the stuff he does for us softball wise. So just tremendous on that end. You know, Courtney, you know, off the field, you know, she's the wife, she runs the house. But she's a really good pitching coach. She was an All-American pitcher at Northwestern. She was their pitching coach for 5 years, had a lot of success there. Pitched in the Women's College World Series, pitched professionally over in Italy. You know, was our pitching coach on staff when I was at Louisiana Lafayette with Jerry, was our pitching coach under Jimmy at UAB, and then with me at UAB. She was a successful head coach at Bucknell, which is a hard place to win. So we're really, you know, she does all the academic advising for our athletes. So just really, really fortunate that worked out. You know, I know, hey, we're married, but I went up against her as a hitting coach for 3 years in the Big Ten. When I was at Penn State, it was challenging. I'll put it that way. So she does a good job. She's coached several All-Americans, so we're pretty ecstatic. And all the paperwork stuff, all the travel, all the equipment, in addition to being our pitching coach, she does. But she's we've all been pretty versatile at times in our career. But those having three people that have been Division I head coaches and been successful helps. So I'm really, really fortunate on that end.
Right. Coach, we appreciate you joining us. We're going to let you get out of here. You're kind of, like you said, you're wearing multiple hats tonight. You're also taking care of your 4-year-old. So you said it may not last very long, but it lasts a lot longer than I think you really anticipated.
Well, I appreciate it. And, credit to Rustin for not blowing up the broadcast too badly, my 4-year-old. So I appreciate you guys having me on, and we hope to see you soon for sure. Thanks so much for supporting Northeast softball.
Well, Coach, it was good this time. You was kind of a little bit more of a relaxed atmosphere. A lot of times when we've talked to you in the past, you've been on the road and been busy. So it was great to hear from you, kind of get to sit on the couch and give us some true, honest answers and not in a big hurry. So it's been a pleasure. It's a pleasure to get to know you a lot better. I think we learned a whole lot more about you. And, I think these young ladies coming to here, and you talked about Jimmy, get them on campus, he'll win them over. But, all the experience y'all have is going to be beneficial to this program because a lot of people already know who you are.
Yeah, it helps. And, it helps in this regard. And I'm not trying to sound arrogant or anything, but, you go back to the summer league deal. Every kid had a deal within about 2 weeks. We had 2 D1s come up in just our first year. And because of some of the atmosphere that I described earlier, it's going to be more about, can you find a place if you're going to go the transfer route, whether it's 2-year, whether it's 4-year. And, we're recruiting a lot more and more up against 4-year schools. Can you find a place that's going to get you where you need to go? And are they going to be connected and are going to be able to develop enough to get you where you need to go? And that's where I think we're gaining some traction right now, just with the experience of the staff and having those connections. So obviously the player has to play their part, but those things help us for sure. So we're excited about that going forward.
Well, one question I want to ask you: if a young lady or a parent is looking to get recruited by Northeast, how's the best way for them to do that?
Well, in kind of an intimate setting, camps never hurt. In this day and age, they can email us. That we're pretty visible on social media. I am more so than I want to be, but the number one reason why I'm there is recruiting. I mean, I stayed off for years. We kind of got to a generational point where I think you just can't do it anymore without being there. There have been more and more players in the last 5 or 6 years that we've gotten a tip because of social media. Now, there's a lot of crap on there. There's a lot of stuff that, is just kind of, I tell everybody it's an advertising world. Well, advertising is good, but it's not always honest. That's social media. I feel like, from an advertising standpoint, both for the recruit and us, it's invaluable. It really is. But is that where we're going to make our complete evaluation? No, but that might help us figure out who you are. And get you going into the camps and the game schedules and all that good stuff. So that's what I think. It's a modern day Rolodex. I'm going to say that, and anybody under 40 has no idea what I'm talking about, but you guys do. So yeah, that's what it is. So, but that helps us for sure. Social media, email, if you can get up with us there, I think we can kind of start taking the next step and camps, because we advertise those on social media. So, those are a big deal. We've certainly recruited out of camps here and at other places we've been. So, that would be the best avenues to get it done for sure.
Yeah. Well, Coach, we appreciate having you on. And like we say, anything that we can do to help you in any way, we'll be glad to. Hopefully this season I'll be able to get to a game or two. Last year didn't work out too well. I get busy during football season big time, but I sure want to come see the young ladies play.
Well, you guys are welcome anytime, and we greatly appreciate you having us on for sure. So thank you very much.
Well, Coach, before you get going, the CEO and owner, Randy Cunningham, gave me a call this afternoon, and we talked for a little while, and we'd like to make a proposal for you. This fall, when you get started and everything, we'd like to either do a weekly or a bi-weekly show with you and the girls. You don't have to give us an answer right now. Just
Okay.
think about it, and have you and the girls on. Maybe bring in a player or two every week or every 2 weeks, whatever's best for you, and do a Northeast Community College softball show.
Love to do it. I will, in our place, and I know Phil knows this, but I'm going to say it, and it's a good thing because we got a good man running our place. But I'm saying it publicly. I will ask permission for Dr. Campbell and get it going. But I'm certainly optimistic he would want to do that, and I certainly would. So I'll run that up the flagpole with him and Jimmy, and we'll get on that. I appreciate the opportunity for sure.
Yeah,
So
I'd like one of these days. I'd like to twist Dr. Campbell's arm a little bit and see if we can get him on to talk to him
Sure.
a little bit.
Yeah, love to do it.
He's been a huge part of the growth of. He has definitely left a legacy at Northeast College for sure.
There's no question, and softball is a part of that. But boy, I don't have you don't have enough time on the show to cover all of it. But big shoes with that guy. He is he's like the Bear Bryant of college presidents that I've dealt with. So and I hope he's around 20 more years. He's really, really done a good job. So, but yeah, I appreciate you guys throwing that out there, and we'll certainly run that up the flagpole. I'd love to get that done. It sounds like a great idea.
Well, we'd love to be able to do it and get more exposure out there. I'm glad you brought up the social media aspects of it here at the very end. That way it kind of led into me being able to throw that out and see what you thought. And we'll be in contact later on and see how everything goes. And like I say, some weeks it may be me and Phil. It could be Randy and Phil. It could be me and Randy. Who knows? But love to have you and some of the girls on, like I say, weekly or bi-weekly, and go over some of the past games and the future games that you'll be playing.
Okay. Well, sounds good, guys. I appreciate it.
Maybe it's time that we can do a show live from Northeast.
Love to do it. Yeah, love to do it. I will take all that back for sure. So thank you again. I appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. So for Phil Harris, I'm Howard Chain, and our guest tonight was Coach Joe Guthrie of Northeast Alabama Community College. Good night and God bless everybody.